our speaker, Margo Seltzer. Just a little bit about her. She's actually an electrical engineering and computer science professor at Harvard. And in 2011, she was named a fellow at the Association of Computing Machinery. So give a warm welcome to Margo, and she will tell us more about herself.
So this slide is actually the slide that will tell you more about who I am. So I am a mother. I have a daughter who's sort of an artsy one. I have a son who's kind of a math geek. He's up there. That's the Meadowbrook math team. I also like to bake, and in particular, my kid has food allergies, so I have to bake without ingredients, which makes it challenging. So these were my Thanksgiving cakes with no gluten and no dairy ingredients. And you can sort of see the calculator math cake that I did for the math team, because that's kind of fun. I'm also married and have a husband, and he does a lot, as you can see. That's really unfair. He really does. I also have 3 cats, only 2 of whom agreed to pose for this. So that's part of who I am. I'm also, if I could like pick what I really wanted to be when I grow up, it would be a professional soccer player. So I'm a huge fan of the women's national soccer team. I spent 10 days traveling around Germany last summer, following them around for all the first round games, not the game against Brazil, unfortunately. And so here is me with my friend Bex and Abby Wambach in Dresden. So that was really cool. And I actually play soccer on a team, the same team I've played on since 1985. And so that's my soccer team at our soccer banquet up there. Our team was put in the Massachusetts Soccer Hall of Fame just because we've been around for a while, not because we're any good. But we have a fun, and it's an incredible group of women. And above all, I don't take myself too seriously. So this was me at our 80s party at Usenix. So that's a little bit more about who I am. I try not to take myself too seriously. I do have a career in technology, and I will tell you a little bit about that. But I also have a lot of stuff going on in my life outside of that. And so that was sort of the first thing I wanted to say. So the rest of the talk I'm going to divide up into 6 sections, sort of, you know, the early years, college, et cetera, et cetera. And in each of those, I'm going to try to be really quick, but I'm going to summarize each of those with sort of what I think was the most important thing I learned during that period. So let's start with the early years. The message to take away from this one is be the smart girl. Okay? What does that mean? So I grew up in a family of 2 older brothers who were like 8.5 and 10.5 years older than I was. And so the entire time I was growing up, they were always like really smart and always second in their class. And the reason they were second in their class is because there was always the smart girl. And so I just grew up with it like embedded in my brain that, you know, I have to be the smart girl because, you know, the boys, they're boys. They couldn't be the smart girl. So, so that was sort of the overriding message I had growing up. There was no message that girls can't do math or girls can't do this. So my message to you is be the smart girl. And you're here, so you've probably gotten that one under your belt. So then, now I grew up in a little tiny town in upstate New York where we had more cows than people. No lie. And so then, on a whim, I applied to Harvard to go to college. No one in my school knew where Harvard was. So of my graduating class of 93, I think I was the only person who went out of state. So I sort of got to Harvard, and it was different. Let's just put it that way. So let's see. I forget what my lesson was for the college years. College, the lesson is do stuff you like. So the first thing I did and threw myself into in college was the marching band. So I played the trumpet, and I actually became the first female student conductor of the band. You might say, oh, you must have been a real music geek in high school. No, not really. I'd never composed, I'd never conducted, but you know, we needed one, and it seemed like a fun thing to learn at the time. So I did that. I was also an applied math major. Now, here's the piece of anti-advice. So this is, I kid you not, how I picked my major in college, and I actually do not recommend this for anyone else because it's kind of dumb, but it worked out okay. So I knew I didn't want to write a thesis. That was my first mistake. And I also knew I didn't want to take general exams. And I also knew that I was sort of a mathy and science person. So I went through all the things you could major in, and I eliminated all of them that you either had to write a thesis to get honors or you had to take a general exam. And that left me applied math. And so, and we didn't have computer science at the time, but you could do computer science as an applied mathematician. So I kind of picked that. And I I kind of knew that computers were cool because when I was in high school, I'm dating myself here, we bought a computer my senior year. It was a TRS-80. How many of you have ever even heard of a TRS-80? Ooh, yay, okay. The permanent store was something called a floppy disk. No, it wasn't even a floppy disk. It was before floppy disks. It was a cassette drive. So if you wanted to store anything between times you turned your computer on, you put a cassette in. But it was kind of cool. You could write programs. But the person who really fell in love with the computer, my father. So he kept the computer. I went off to college. I studied computer science. And I did a bunch of stuff. I did the band, did that for a couple years. I ended up teaching a lot. So Harvard has undergraduate teaching assistants. And so I actually did a lot of that. And that was really fun. And I actually enjoyed that a lot. And that's sort of a little foreshadowing to where my career ended up. So that was college. So I graduated from college. And some people think about going to graduate school. But that thought had never crossed my mind at that point. I was kind of tired of school. And so I wanted to go get a job. And so next we call the startup years. So in a period of under 5 years, I did 3 different startups. Startups are totally insane. You don't sleep a lot. You learn an incredible amount. And it's a little bit crazy, but it's a lot of fun. And ultimately, the last one I ended up in is kind of weird. So I'd done software as a college student. I had never built a circuit. I had never taken a course in processor design. And I got hired to design a brand new computer and microprocessor. Now, I think this says more about the founders of the company than about me. But it was like, cool, I've never done that. That'll be fun. And so I did. And I learned in 18 months, I learned an amazing amount. The machine actually did eventually ship and run, but I was long gone by then. And so the message from that period is take risks, especially when you're young, right? If you're 25, you don't have a family, you can go work for a startup. If it's out of business, you can go find another one, or a big company. So take risks, learn stuff, do things you love. So let's see. That takes us up through 1988. Then I went to graduate school. And I went to the University of California at Berkeley. And the 2 best things that happened to me at Berkeley were, one, I met my husband because I moved into an apartment and he was my apartment mate. And since both of us were sort of geeks at the time, we probably never would have gotten married otherwise. So it worked out OK. You know, it's been 20 some odd years. We're still married. We're happy. We have kids and cats. It worked out. We also had a company. And then the other thing that was really cool about graduate school is I started a soccer team when I got to Berkeley, because who am I? I'm a soccer groupie, right? Forget about the whole engineering. I'm a soccer groupie. So I started a soccer team. In the Bay Area, you start in like the lowest division. And before I finished my PhD, we'd played our way up to the top division. And so I played semi-competitively soccer for a couple of years, which was really cool. So that was pretty fun. And I think this is probably, you know, all kidding aside, the lesson I learned in grad school is perhaps the most important, and the one that you should take away. If you forget everything else I said, this is the one thing to remember. And I call it my 3-legged stool theory. So if you've ever sat on like a little 3-legged stool, if one of the legs breaks or, you know, is not quite sturdy, you can still kind of sit, and it's kind of good. But if like 2 break, it's sort of a problem. So how this translates into real life is that you should always have 3 things in your life that you care passionately about. Ideally, one of them will be your job or school. Ideally, one of them will be human, either your friends, your family, your relationships. Doesn't have to be a spouse, doesn't have to be kids, but there will be people in your life you care about passionately, and there should be something else. And the reason you should have 3 things is so that if any one of them isn't going well, you have a source of strength from something else. It is rare that all 3 of them will go badly at the same time. And so you always have sort of one leg to stand on. So if you take nothing else away from the talk, the question is, what are the things in your life you can be passionate about? And you may have more than 3 now, and that's OK. But when the going gets rough and you have to cut down, don't cut down too far. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that there are enough things that you really, really, really care passionately about, that when one of them's going well, whether one of them's going badly, whether it's work or broke my ankle 2 years ago, didn't play soccer for a while, kind of sucked, but had work and family to fall back on. Always make sure there's something else in your life to fall back on. So that's the big one. So I graduated from graduate school, and then I got a job at Harvard as a professor. And it turns out being in the university is great because since all the people around you are always about the same age, you always feel like you're about the same age too. So shockingly, I've been in the university for almost 20 years, and I feel exactly the same age I did when I got there. I know the math doesn't exactly work out that way, but it feels that way, and that's great. Also, you know, deep secret, I actually love students. It's a little scary for me now because some of those first students are leaders of industry and like really famous and well known. It's like, whoa, they took courses from me. That's really cool. And also during my time as a professor, I did a few other things. I had 2 kids. I started a company in, I guess it was about year 4 of being a professor. I fixed bugs in our product while in the hospital having delivered my first child. I did our tax returns for the company while in the hospital having given birth to my second child. It got a little insane. I became an associate dean, which you should think of as department chair. At the same time, it turns out we were selling the company. That was kind of insane. So a lot of times my life feels a little bit crazy and out of control. And I think because of how often that happens, the deep, dark truth is that I probably like it that way a little bit. So my new mantra in my lesson for 2012 is, it's all my fault. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if my life is a little bit insane, it's because I've let it get insane. So if it's too insane, it means that I have the ability to kind of shut it down a little bit and start saying no to things. And it actually takes a while to learn to say no to things. But this is a very great skill to develop also. And then learning which things to say no to is equally important. But my new mantra for 2012 is, it's all my fault. But that means that I have the power to fix it. And I think in general that's true. When things aren't going well, figure out what you can do to fix them, and life gets better. So I think I managed to cover that remarkably quickly, which means I could actually take some questions or talk about things I didn't talk about. Come on, be brave. Take risks. This is the take risks part of the show. Yeah, go for it.
Why were you selling your company?
Oh, why did I sell the company? So we had a small company. It was called Sleepycat Software. You use our software every day. How many of you have ever gone to like the front page of Amazon? Like logged into www. Yeah, so when you do that, the nice customized experience you get, they make 800 accesses to one of our databases to populate that page for you. So we built this embedded database product. We were a standalone company for about 10 years. We were profitable since day one. We employed about 25 people. And we had a really teeny tiny sales force of 3 people. And Oracle came knocking and said, we'd kind of like to buy you. And when you're a small database company and a big database company with thousands and thousands of salespeople says they'd like to buy you, it's very, very interesting. And so the main reason we sold was that we felt that that was the opportunity to sort of take our software to the next level. And so actually, back in October, Oracle just announced their big data appliance, and on there is a piece of software that's really based on our technology. So that's kind of cool. And I have to admit, it is, when I say I love what I do, not only do I love being a professor, I love the fact that I can talk to pretty much anyone on the planet now. And because of something they do on a computer, I can tell them that they're running my software. And that's really, really fun. So that's why we sold the company. Another question. Come on, be brave. Take risks. Go for it. What do I teach? So right now, well, actually, that's a funny story. So traditionally, I teach courses in databases and operating systems. I've also taught our introductory, our first year course, and our second semester course. And then most recently, so I'm on sabbatical this year, which means I'm not supposed to be teaching, but because, go back to the last thing, I'm insane, I actually taught a course in the fall with a woman at the business school on innovating in healthcare technology. And so it was sort of a field studies course where students did projects on either looking at existing companies and products and trying to figure out how to position them, or developing new products in the healthcare space. So I teach a lot of different stuff. But my major research areas are databases and operating systems. So I'm kind of a software geek.
What's a typical day look like for you?
okay, let's take today, although today's not entirely typical. So I try to get up at 5 and I work out in the morning. So get up at 5, feed the cats, empty the dishwasher, go work out, either treadmill or spin bike. Come upstairs, get dinner ready for my daughter. My son sleeps too late to actually eat breakfast. I'm sorry, that was breakfast, not dinner. Okay, make breakfast for my daughter. She comes down, I hang out with her while she eats breakfast. And then I run upstairs and shower. Her carpool picks her up at 7:30. So she takes off, and then I usually go to work. So I'm on sabbatical this semester, so I'm up in Burlington. Oh, this morning was different. This morning I met with one of my former students. Oh, this is a great story. So this is one of my former PhDs. And she continually feels like a failure because she didn't do the traditional route. Okay, this woman was an artist before she went to graduate school in computer science. And what she's done over the last 5 years is figured out the mathematics behind tiling on a torus, which it turns out is what you need to do to make crocheted beaded bracelets. So she has a paper that she's published in math conferences about math and art, and she's now in the process of publishing a book on this stuff. Okay, you know, she looked at me and, oh, I'm so embarrassed. It's like, what you do is so cool. So anyway, that was a little pitch for her. But so we had breakfast, and then I got to work. And then what did I do today? So I'm in the process of getting a bunch of documents off the web and then trying to develop a classifier to decide if they're medical documents or not, because I have this medical project. So I worked for a while, had lunch with a bunch of my colleagues, and then because I was coming down here, I checked Google Maps to see what the traffic was like, which turned out to be good because the short route was backed up. Zipped down here. And because last night my son decided that he wanted to go to one of these high school visiting evenings this night, after this I'm going to drive back out to Lincoln, pick up my son, drive down to Needham. We're going to go to this social event, and then I will come home. And that's not exactly a typical day, but it's not far off. You know, if it's not taking him to Needham, it's taking my daughter to karate. But I tend to have dinner with my kids every night, almost. You know, unless I'm traveling, I try to have dinner with the kids, which means I actually turn down some things at school. Faculty dinners are one. So, you know, when I do travel a little bit more than I might like at the moment, but when I'm home, I have breakfast with my kids, I have dinner with my kids, I'm a room parent in their school, and I know what's going on in their life to the extent that they will let me. They're now approaching teenage years, and I don't need to tell you guys what that means. Actually, you probably know more about my kids' lives than I do. Any other questions?
How long does it take for you to start up your business?
So the startup story for us was a little weird. We didn't do the traditional venture capital thing. What happened was when I was in graduate school, my husband cleverly convinced me to write a piece of software that initially shipped with the Berkeley software distribution. So Berkeley used to do versions of Unix. And so we wrote this package and it shipped, and I wrote a paper on it. And it had been out for a few years. And then we got a call from a company named Netscape. Anybody heard of Netscape? Okay, good, good. So they called us and they said, so did you ever, release the software about this paper? It's like, that was grad school software. It didn't really work. They said, well, we'd really like to use it. I said, well, and then they said interesting words that hadn't really occurred to us. We'd pay you for it. Like, oh, well, that would be kind of cool. And so we ended up starting the company based on a deal that we struck with Netscape. And we structured the deal such that if we never sold another copy, it would be OK. But we retained the rights to the software. So if we wanted to try to sell it, we could. Lo and behold, other people wanted to buy it, too. So it was really sort of a mom and pop, put a website out there and see if anybody wanted to buy it. And they did. So it was kind of cool. It's harder to do that now. Although if you think about how Facebook started, it wasn't all that much more focused. Any other questions? Yeah.
What has been one of the bigger challenges you've faced in maintaining balance with the different aspects?
So what's the hardest problem about maintaining balance? Saying no, choosing not to be insane, I think is really the number one. In that, and actually there's sort of this underlying current that, and I think this is stronger in academia, which is that a lot of people in academia are crazy in the way that I described, like they do way too many things. And there's a little bit of a culture that makes that the norm. And so if you want to achieve balance, sometimes you feel like it's kind of weird and like you're different than everybody else. And as a senior person now in the faculty, I don't think we tell the junior people enough that actually you can draw a line and say no. So I have one colleague who I really admire. She's actually very junior to me, but she doesn't read email on weekends. She does not read email on weekends. That's family time, and she really, really doesn't. I mean, it's not like she reads it and doesn't. No, she really, really doesn't read it. And I think learning to draw those boundaries and deciding for yourself how you're going to balance is the hardest thing. Because if you let the people and the forces around you make those decisions, they will suck you dry and work you to death. And so, you know, and it's not that they're evil or mean, it's just that they've got a different agenda than yours. So I think in my mind, achieving balance is really deciding I can do a good job and get a lot of work done and it'll be high quality, and then I can have a life, and I'm going to do those things. So, you know, having the date book and making the meeting with your boss of the same importance as your aerobics class is really important.